Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 10 in our ability system series. In this tutorial series we're going over how to create an ability system using just blueprints. Previously we started work on our buffs and the type of abilities that are buffs. Now we've got them spawning into the world and attaching it to the player. However, we're now going to clean up a little bit of code there and then start working on the user interface front. So the first bit of cleanup is the problem that we mentioned at the end of the last episode, which is how to clear the duplicates. So you can see it starts with 31 actors. If I hit the cast, it goes to 32, which we would expect. If I hit again, it goes to 33, which is not what I want. What I want it to do is to clear any duplicate actors from the attached list and reset them, basically. So we're going to go into our ability buff, and we're going to add a new function here. So go new function, and we call this one clear duplicate. And on clear duplicates, we're going to use the caster variable, which is something we set in the when we first click the button to spawn the ability. So I'm going to show you. Here you can see this when we click on the button for spawning an actor of this ability, we take it to the caster, the player character. So the caster is whatever is casting the spell. So this is very useful because we want this system to also be used by the enemies and other targets. So on this caster, we're going to get attached actors, and that'll give us this array. And this is going to get us a list of all the attached actors to our caster. Now this will involve mostly the spells and abilities that we've got on our character, including the buffs, but it could be other things as well. So what we need to do is go through this list and see if any of them match this current one. So the out actors here, we're going to plug that into a for each loop. This for each loop is going to cycle through them, and we're going to get the class of the array element. And we're also going to get the class of this ability itself. So look for self and get a class from there. We're now going to compare these two together. So if this is equal to this, that means we want to remove it. So this will go into a branch, and this will then go to trigger the array element to be destroyed. So destroy actor. So that will get rid of the old one and replace it with the new one. So hit compile and go back to your event graph. Now where to place this? Now instead of putting it on the end, what we're going to actually do is put it in between the event begin play and the parent begin play. Now the reason why is because we want to call the parent begin play after we clear the duplicates. So if I plug that in there like so, and the reason why we want it afterwards is because this parent begin play is actually going to call something important. So this is the parent, and you can see this is where we attach it to the caster. Now we don't want to do that. We want to just first of all clear any attached duplicates and then apply this as an attached one. Otherwise you're going to go through and clear duplicates, and you're going to get this happening twice, one for the first time and one for the second time, which is not what we want. So hit compile, and that should now clear any duplicates we have on our player. So here, start off with 31, goes to 32, hit again, and you can see it remains at 32. Excellent, that's all we want. So the next part of this episode is we're going to go through and how to make it display visually in the corner here the buffs that the player has. So let's go into our UI folder, and we're going to create a new folder inside of that and call it buffs UI, and open this up. Now we're going to need a panel, and we're also going to need a buffs UI icon itself. So we're going to right click and do new user interface widget blueprint, and we go buff icon UI, and this is going to be the individual buff icon that appears inside this panel. So this is not going to have a canvas panel, so I can clear that, and instead we're going to have a size box, and the size we're going to do is a width override of let's do 64, and hit compile. Change from fill screen to desired so you can see what we're working with. So in here, we're going to do a vertical box layout. And the vertical box is going to take all the components inside of it and stack them vertically. So the first thing you need is an image. And this image, we're going to set the size to, on image size here, to 64 by 64. And then below that, we are actually no, we'll put a progress bar over the top of this. So to do that, we need to do an overlay. So on the vertical box here, we're actually going to replace this with an overlay. So the overlay means that we can have multiple components on top of each other. So we're going to have the image, and on top of that, we're going to have the progress bar. So the progress bar, you want to make sure it's on top of it, and we're going to make it fill horizontally and vertically. And to make sure we see what we're working with, I'm going to change the percent a little bit here, about halfway. And rather than going from left to right, we're going to make it go from top to bottom, like so. Okay. And what we'll do here is we're going to change some of the way it's styled. So I'm going to change the background image, and we're going to change that to nothing. So to do that, we're going to change this to none. And the fill image, we're going to change the coloring of it. Not there, sorry. Where is it? It's down here. Fill and color and opacity. Open this up, and we're going to change the alpha here to 0.5, and we'll make it a grey. Okay, so it will now overshadow the image of the buff being displayed. Okay, so as it counts down, it will do this, and then remove itself. Cool. So I'm just going to label a couple of things here that we need to set. So on the image, I'm going to change the name here to buff, buff image, and we'll make sure it is variable is ticked. It should be. Just make sure it is. And the progress bar, we're also going to do here and do buff timer. Again, make sure its variable is ticked. Again, it should be, so it shouldn't be an issue. Hit compile, and we can close this for now. Next, we need to make the panel which is going to store all these buff icons. So let's make another user interface widget blueprint. Buff panel. Let's stick to my naming convention here. So I'm going to go buff panel underscore UI and open this up. Again, we don't need the canvas panel because we're using not absolute. We're using relative positioning, not absolute positioning. And this thing is going to have a panel which will be. Oh, first of all, we need a size box. Do a size box, and we'll do a width override of. Now, if they're 64 wide, and let's say we give them 3 pixels each side margin, so it goes up to 70. If I say I want 10, or I say 5 in a row, I need to do 70 times 5, so that equals 350. So 350 in the width there, and height I'm going to leave blank, so it can continue to fill up the whole entire screen. So with the size box, we're then going to go into our panels, and we're going to use the wrap box. And the wrap box is going to take the contents and store them in a row, and when it reaches the end, it will go to the next line, and so on and so forth. So on the wrap box here, we can change a couple of things we want here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the inner slot padding here to use the X value of 3 and the Y value of 3. And that gives us padding on all the contents inside the wrap box. Now, to demonstrate how the wrap box works, I'm going to drag in our buff icon, and I'm going to duplicate it multiple times, and you can see it will then wrap them around to the next line in the wrap box. Now, in the wrap box, by default, you can't change its direction, so you can't make it go from right to left. If you want to do something like that, you'll need to use some funky use of the horizontal box or grid panels to achieve that. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to keep it as it is, like here. So that's how the wrap box will look. I'm just going to clear these buffs out of it because we don't need them there. And the wrap box here, I'm going to make it a variable by ticking a little box up here, and we'll change the name of this one to buff panel. And this is going to be the container which stores our buff icons when we get to it. So on this thing, we're also going to go to the graph, and we're going to create a function here called add buff to UI. Okay, and this is going to take a buff as an input. So go to your inputs here, new parameter, and this is going to be a buff ability. So in the type here, we want ability buff, like so. And this is what's going to create the buff icons into our scene. So in here, we're going to go create widget, and we're going to choose the buff icon, the one we just made. Now the buff icon is going to require some values, so we need to go back to our buff icon and set up some values there. So let's go back to our buff icon and go to the graph. In here, we need to determine what buff we want to show. So on the variables here, new variable, we're going to refer this to a buff ability, and the variable type for that is ability buff. And when it is constructed, we're going to tell that image to change itself to the icon of the buff being applied to it. So with the buff ability, drag that out, get the ability details, because part of those details is the thumbnail. So right click in there, split that, and you'll see the ability decals icon has appeared here. That means I can now drag my buff image out here, and I can set brush from texture, and the texture is going to be the icon. Hit compile. Okay. The next thing we'll need is also the timer for the ability. So on the event construct here, we're going to set up a timer for the updating of the progress bar. That it will be the countdown timer for how long is left on our buff. So on the construct here, we're also going to need to get the buff abilities lifespan. Get buff lifespan, and we're going to just promote that to a variable here, so we've got easy access to it. Like so. So to work out how much time is left on the timer, what we need to do is get this buff ability and get lifespan. And you'll see here it says get the remaining lifespan of the actor. So if I click on this, this will give us how much time is left on the buff ability that is currently up. Using this, I can then plug in and access and change the percent that is left on the buff timer progress bar. Now the progress bar only is a normalized value between 0 and 1, so we need to change this to match not match, compare it with the lifespan we saved up here, and to work out how much time has passed. So drag your buff lifespan, which we promoted up here, which you get, and we want to normalize to a range here. So we're going to go normalize to range. It's a float one. So the value we want to change is this is this value from the get lifespan, and the range max is the buff lifespan. So it's going to be 0 to whatever the lifespan is, and the amount of time it's left will be output to a normalized range. A normalized range is between 0 and 1, which is what the progress bar works towards. So using this, we can update the progress bar. So to do that, I'm going to make a custom event called update progress bar. So I'm going to drag out my buff timer and then set percent and plug that in and plug that in. So now this event here is going to trigger this set percent like so. Now, how do we call this? Well, this is going to be on a short timer. So next is how we actually call this actual event here. So here I'm going to delete it. With that done, we now need to be able to call this. So to call it, we're going to set up a timer and do a set timer by event. And the event is going to plug into our update progress bar. Now the time is how often you want it to update. So I'm going to do 0.5, so every half a second it will loop round and update the progress bar. I can hit compile and we'll leave it like that. Now what I want to do here is if percent of this is at 0 or below, we want to remove the progress bar. Or what would be far easier and better is checking whether or not the buff is still valid. Because if the buff is valid, that means it's still there, and therefore the timer should be too. If it's not there, it means the timer's run out and it's gone. So with the buff ability, we're going to right click on it and promote that to a convert to validated get. And plug that in. So if it's valid, it'll go there. If it's not valid, we're going to remove from parent. And hit compile. And that should be it for our buff icon. Close that. And now, if I go back to my buff panel, change back to none, then choose buff icon. First of all, I need to actually tell the buff icon to show the buff ability in the settings. So I'm going to go in here, make it public, and expose on spawn. And it now should appear here. There it is. So the buff will go into buff ability. Once we've got that created, we're going to add it to our buff panel. So drag your buff panel variable out and get, and we go add child to wrap box. And the content will plug it into your return value. And hit compile. So now we've got a function that will add buffs to our screen here. So what I'm going to do is now add this to my HUD. So let's find my HUD and add it to the top. I'm going to align it in the X to 1. And I'll reposition then in the X by -50 and Y by 50. And hit compile. And there we have it. So now, when I want to access and call that function we just made that adds a buff to it, I need to access this buff panel UI and call that function. So let's go and do that. On the ability buff here, we're going to apply buff. Not apply buff there. We'll go, apply buff. Sorry, apply buff here. We want to get the HUD from it. So I'm going to go and get the HUD UI. We can then get the buff panel and then apply, add buff to UI function. And the buff we want to call is itself. Let's hit compile. So let's test this out. And there you can see a buff is being added to our buff panel. And you can see a progress bar ticking down how much time is left. So there we see it. If I hit again, it will reset the clock. Okay. So what we'll need to do is make sure, I think I'm going to fix the progress bar not to do that direction. So let's change that quickly. Not that one, this one. So to switch it around, I'm going to change the percent here to minus and do a float, minus float. And we'll just type in 1 here. and then plug that in. Compile. See how that looks. You see it then grading down. Hit it again. You see it reset. And then it should clear like so. So you can see the bar starts halfway full. The reason why is because in my design view here, I've got it set to default at 0. So let's change that to 0 there. And now I should not do that jumpy thing and just count down. Excellent. Now when I hit again, it does show the second debuff before it's removing a duplicate. So we'll have to take a look at how we fix that. So the reason why we're seeing 2 of the abilities pop up temporarily is because this update progress bar is what's handling the removing of the icon. And this is happening only half a second at a time. So we have to wait for that timer to tick around half a second before it removes and updates itself. So what we need to do is do an event binding to trigger and remove this this icon. So go to your ability buff parent and go to event dispatchers and do buff removed. And what we're going to do is call this binding for buff removed when this thing has been destroyed. So add the event for end play and drag your buff removed event dispatcher out and choose call. This will shout out that the buff has been removed to anything that wants to listen to it. And with that thing that wants to listen to it is the buff icon. So at the end of the construct, I'm going to drag my buff ability variable out and then bind buff removed to an event. So when this hears that buff has been removed, it's going to call an event. And we're going to do a custom event for clear icon. And this is simply just going to do remove from parent. Hit compile, and let's take a look at that. So there's my first one, and you see it ticking down. Hit again, and you can see we don't get that duplicate error again. And there you go. So that will do us for that for now. We'll come back to these abilities later on and do the effects like damage and healing and the buff exactly itself at the end when we've done the debuff. So join us next time when we work towards our debuff and we'll show you how that is set up. So thanks for watching. If you want us to watch the next episode right now, head over to patreon.com/RyanAiley, where a donation of just $1 will get you access to that video plus many others. Big shout out and thank you to all my patrons and YouTube members for their support. This wouldn't be happening without you guys, so big thank you to all of you for your continued support of me. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.